The story begins with the sinking of a huge ship. Several boys hold firmly on the edges of the vessel and groan with tiredness and effort. One of the boys looks down and breathes heavily. Suddenly, he hears someone scream. His eyes roll out. He sees a girl with blue hair falling into the water in panic, extending her arms up in the hope of being saved. The boy reaches out, trying to reach her. The girl also reaches out to him. His hands touch. The boy's eyes suddenly open. The sweat runs down your face. He sees ahead of him many students who talk loudly. He looks around and realizes he's in the middle of a noisy crowd. One of the boys screams he doesn't want to die anytime soon. The girl grabs her head and screams, "Why?" The boy doesn't understand why it had to be him. The main character walks quietly through the crowd. No one pays attention to him. He sits quietly and thinks out loud. So that means he's dead. He sighs. The main character is Amamiya Hiroto. The ship they were traveling on sank during a terrorist attack, and so the Osaka high school students who were going on the trip ended up dying. He considers this to be very shocking news. A certain Makida Aran says that then it means that they are basically dead. Now he thinks he should have played more. Makida Aran approaches a girl in glasses and asks what her plans are. She apologizes and says she doesn't have time for this. This girl's name is Shimada Izumi. She yells at all the guys who know they're in shock because of what happened to them. But everyone needs to get together. A boy named Minami Asagi screams that at a time like this, they must keep their minds calm. It's no use crying over something that's already happened. Sitting next door, Junbai Murakami listens. While he screams that from now on, although they don't know what to expect from the future, it's best to remain calm and say they're very energetic, considering that they're all dead. Minami Asagi screams at Murakami, his teacher, that everyone is starting to panic, so he asks you to help him. The teacher says it's no use, because I've told them everything I can. That blue-haired girl looks around with caution and confusion. His name is Narun Amamiya. Haramiya Hiroto sees her and is surprised. He says that, in the end, she was not saved. Remembering her face when she fell into the water, he remembers the situation more clearly. He then held her hand. I told her to hold on tighter. He kept pulling her and saying everything was fine, asking her to come up. However, the ship was drifting after that. Amemiya Hiroto turned and fell into the water. The girl sees that he's falling and, with tears in his eyes, calls for him without having time to reach him. He, already dead, thinks they weren't close enough to be frank. It was a sudden decision. He just couldn't let her die. Suddenly, a voice is heard by Amamiya Hiroto. The voice says that among the souls who were once dead, they are the chosen ones. A certain Rikudo Hijari wonders what's going on. Where exactly are they? It's getting too clear. They cover their faces with their hands. Man shines brightly. Someone grabs a cell phone and starts filming it. Tsushiya Kaneko, in tears, asks what that is. Is it really an angel? Will you finally explain what's going on? The man, Konumi Miyagi, screams with fear. Shimada Izumi asks everyone to remain silent. And you suggest that first you listen to what he has to say. The brilliant silhouette says his name is Rodcourt. At this very moment, he will grant each of them a special power, a new life, and a new luck. And then they will be reborn in a place significantly different from the earth they lived on. Amamiya Hiroto is thinking about rebirth. Does he really mean reincarnation? Another world? This is the first time he has heard of such circumstances. Rodcourt says they don't have to do that if they don't want to. They can be revived normally somewhere on Earth. In that case, however, they will not receive any special power from him. And the whole memory of this place will be completely destroyed. People started arguing and thinking. Rodcourt says that now, for those who wish to be reborn on Earth, he asks them to say their names. Amemiya Hiroto considers that if he is reincarnated into a completely different world, he will receive special luck and talent. In other words, he will live a second life with memories of a past life. That's not bad, more like a dream. He looks up and thinks very few people would refuse such conditions. So raise your hand. Someone had raised their hand before him, approached Rodcourt and said something. Rodcourt agreed with him and said he would be transferred to the normal cycle of reincarnation. Suddenly this man evaporates into the air. People look at him surprised and scream, pointing their fingers at him. Amemiya Hiroto thinks he's gone, which means he simply refused. He refused God's offering. Rodcourt asks if there is anyone else. So those whose names are called must present themselves. He calls Endakoya. Kid takes a step forward. Rodcourt raises his hands above which float spheres of power, and says now that's his power. These spheres fly and stick themselves in Enda's body, which screams. Rodcourt reaches out and casts a resurrection spell. He calls every one of the dead in turn. Koichi Huinmari, Kaito, Kanata, Minami, Asagi. Amemiya Hiroto sits next door and reflects that this may take some time. He thinks there's no choice but to wait. He sighs because if you think about it, his life hasn't been easy. His parents died when he was little. He has no brothers, no friends, no love. Worst of all is living with the relatives of the father who took him in. He bows his head sadly because no one would shed a tear, even if he died, and these relatives would probably get big insurance after his death, so he thinks they feel more happiness than sadness now. It's not that he disagrees with the life he's had so far. Maybe he has a chance to live a second life, in the literal sense. Receiving a special ability from God, being born into a completely different world, in a happy, normal family, he means. He wonders what else he could expect. Rodcourt calls his name. Amemiya Hiroto. He hears and shrinks. Rodcourt murmurs his name. Amemiya Hiroto, sighing. Somebody get up. Everybody looks at him. On the way, as he walks, he wonders why Amemiya. He has never heard that name before. Whether there was anyone in his class with the same name as him. Should have noticed. He sees a boy approaching Rodcourt and thinks that this appearance of Amemiya Hiroto is not just a matter of name. He looks exactly like him. Rodcourt grants him power with many spheres. Amemiya Hiroto wonders how much that is. All this time, he saw that a person only received from 1 to 3 spheres of light, although God said he'd only give 2 to each of them. This guy's already got 8. That's what they call divine grace. After this guy, a lot of other people are revived. Rodcourt claps and sighs, as if he's made a great effort. He notes Amemiya Hiroto sits behind him and asks, surprised, who he is. Amemiya Hiroto looks at him with indignation. He says his name. Amemiya Hiroto. Rodcourt repeats surprised and asks, does not Amemiya Hiroto? Rodcourt specifies that his surname is Amemiya, as in Celeste Vault, and his first name is Amemiya Hiroto, as in intellectual. Amemiya Hiroto confirms. Rodcourt sighs and slaps himself in the forehead, saying that this is bad and that he made a terrible mistake. He says he thought he and this guy, Amemiya, were the same person. Then he gave him all his power, and he still received all the luck and life that should have been his. Amemiya Hiroto sees him indifferent. Rodcourt panics and walks around saying that it is problematic, that it would be impossible to take the power of Amemiya, and that it cannot create another power to give him. No strength, no luck. Amemiya Hiroto deduces what this means and asks if she will receive anything and will have to start from scratch. Rodcourt says no, and it's even worse. Rodcourt says he should have saved your life, But fate is cruel and ironic, so he will have nothing to look forward to, because his life will never be blessed. Amemiya Hiroto reflects that perhaps then there is no sense in reincarnating. He then says to let him be reborn on Earth like that guy. Rodkorte tells you that's impossible, because the time to choose has passed long ago. Amemiya Hiroto doesn't understand him, and is outraged. All of a sudden, his legs begin to fade slowly. Rodkorte tells you the time of rebirth is almost over, he screams. How is that possible? He's the only one with nothing, and his life is doomed to unhappiness. What does that mean? Rodkorte says your soul will be different as compensation. Different from your colleagues, your soul remains like an empty core. He says that in this core, instead of skill, a huge amount of magic will be stored. He doesn't understand what kind of magic. Rodkorte continues to say that, however, his compatibility with magic is extremely low. That in the world in which he's about to be reborn, he will not be able to use any magical element. Rodkorte, raise your hands. Amemiya Hiroto is outraged. Is that all? An enormous magical power, but the inability to use magic. What kind of nonsense is that? Rodkorte says you feel sorry for him now. Without any skill or luck, he will have extremely difficult journeys ahead. With this inability to use magic, your luck will probably be limited. He will face much more isolation than he had in his previous life. Rodkorte says, he'll have nothing but complete despair. He asks you not to give up, not to blame anyone. He must keep looking forward and live his life to the fullest. Amemiya Hiroto screams. What kind of optimism is that? He disappears. Rodkorte blurs out before your eyes. Amemiya Hiroto screams when being electrocuted. He falls sharply. And a certain man in military uniform appears in front of you. The man says, that's what he deserves for trying to face them. He asks if he regrets it now. The man leaves and says the next experiment will be in 30 minutes, so let him get ready. Here, Amemiya Hiroto finally remembers the day she died in a shipwreck. And because of that stupid mistake of that god, he was reincarnated into this world. Because of him, now he's lying here and suffering. The world to which God sent him was called Origin. It's a little like Earth, but it combines science and magic. He was born of an unworthy woman, soon after his birth, to get money for his father, nothing exemplary. They sold him as an object, so of course he does not remember the appearance of his parents. After that, he was bought. It was purchased by a research organization, where they conducted numerous illegal experiments. One scientist tells another white coat that the results are negative, and that one of them is unusual. He thinks the scientist gives you a document with a photo of Amemiya Hiroto, and says, this is the test object done. Its magical compatibility level is extremely low. To be precise, he has no talent for magic. He asks again about the lack of talent for magic. The scientist confirms and explains. Every normal person has one of the 7 elements. Each one belongs to one of these elements: earth, water, fire, wind, light, life, space. And this child's body doesn't fit any of them. He doesn't even have any talent. The man asks if he really means that he is even worse than the ordinary person. He says you can't experiment with such mediocrity. It's a waste of money. The scientist claims it's okay to discard the bad item, but there is one thing that needs to be carefully considered. He wonders what it is. He adjusts his glasses and says that, according to their considerations, this guy is not a bad thing. The subject has an advantage that surpasses all others. A huge magic source is stored in your body. When asked what he means by that, he answers that they are only personal assumptions. It's not that the subject is incompatible with any element. There's a chance they haven't discovered that element yet. The other scientist's face freezes in horror. There's a dead rat on the table. Amamiya Hiroto stands before him, looks at the palm of his hand, and then extends it towards the mouse. The light's on. His hand emits. It emits a dark energy. Suddenly, the mouse opens its eyes and comes to life. The scientist shouts joyfully. Amamiya Hiroto asks, surprised, if he is really alive. The scientist says no, that rat's body has stopped working, so this magic isn't life cycle. The scientist says that, however, this magic is capable of controlling bodies. Another scientist cheers up and screams that they finally discovered her. The legend is true. Eighth element exists. The first one in glasses says it's the element that controls the dead. They'll call you death. The other laughs and says the element of death sounds good. They tell Amamiya Hiroto to cheer up, for he is the first wizard of death in all the world. The two scientists laugh loudly again, scaring Amamiya Hiroto. Amamiya Hiroto is locked up again. After a while, they come to him and ask him to go there because they need to talk. In another room, a surprised Amamiya Hiroto asks again if they have already discovered it. The scientist tells him it's true, even if he's not completely free. It all depends on your determination. If he agrees to be used as a test machine, he can experience freedom to some extent. Amamiya Hiroto reflects on this degree of freedom and asks if she can go out to the outside world. The scientist tells you there are still some things to consider. Amamiya Hiroto listens carefully. Finally, the scientist says that they have high expectations of his magic of death. If he wants freedom, that he shows the result they want to see. Amamiya Hiroto understands that if she can develop a new kind of magic, she will gain her freedom. He looks at it with determination. A few days later, Amamiya Hiroto is practicing in the library with books. Scientists say they and Amamiya Hiroto are on schedule after listening to his conditions. He believed everything without hesitation, and now he strives harder to create a new magic. A huge silhouette made of books appears before Amamiya Hiroto. Scientists are sure that the more this child interacts with magic, the more terrifying it will become. Another scientist laughs at his words and asks what might frighten a little boy, both his heart and his brain, to the point of installing bombs in case of any rebel actions. And Amamiya Hiroto himself understands that perfectly. They also installed a small tracking device to prevent him from escaping, and his right eye was replaced by an artificial eye with a special camera. There is also a secret recording device installed inside your ears. Now they're able to hear your ears and mouth. No matter how small the sound, they can still hear you. The amount of food he consumes is kept to a minimum to prevent the development of any abnormal physical abilities, and he is also forbidden to leave the room, except during experiments. The other scientist responds to this information by shouting that he already knows it, but says he can still control magic at will. Isn't that too risky for them? The other, who wears glasses, says that maybe he's overthinking it. Finally, he agrees with him and asks if he can control magic at will. He says he can control magic at will, but asks if he has any suggestions. After a while, Amamiya Hiroto is in a room that looks like a laboratory. He asks where he is. Won't they continue to develop his new spell? The glasses scientist says that's true, but before that, they'll just examine his body a little. He doesn't understand that. The scientist leans over and tells him not to worry, and it'll all be over soon. They just want to make sure his body doesn't have an abnormal reaction to the element of death. After all, it is a completely new element for them, so they cannot be sure whether this magic can harm the user's body or not. Amamiya Hiroto lies on the couch. His arms and legs are suddenly immobilized. He panics and yells, "What is this? Why are they tying him up?" He laughs and says not to worry about it. He offers to take care of everything else. Doctors in masks approach from behind. They approach him and begin to reach out. Amamiya Hiroto, with eyes full of horror, Amamiya begins to resist with a trembling voice. After a while, Hiroto wakes up and mentally asks what happened to him. The scientist hears his thoughts and asks how he understood. He offers a snack. Amamiya Hiroto doesn't understand and asks to wait. He feels something's wrong. He can't talk. He can't move his own body. He asks if this is some kind of anesthesia. Amamiya Hiroto realizes she can still feel her body clearly. Another scientist approaches the scientist and asks how Amamiya Hiroto is. He replies that, from what you can see, the operation was a success. He says that the ability to control his body and magic is completely compromised. From this moment on, he can't even move a finger, let alone use magic. Amamiya Hiroto is all bandaged up in a wheelchair and looks down, without emotion. The glasses scientist says that now the control is completely in their hands, and the development of magic will continue without any obstacle. The second scientist approaches him and says he did a good job. Amamiya Hiroto hears all this. He sighs and says Amamiya Hiroto is a death wizard who can control the undead. Although he is alive, now he exists only to be a puppet of other people. How ironic. Amamiya Hiroto thinks to herself, is he kidding? His body doesn't move at all, so now he can only live as their test machine until his life is ended. He thinks about your conscience. You still clearly feel your body. You start to resist and think you don't want to be like this. He can't take it anymore. Ask for help, scream mentally, and call for someone to save him. The scientist approaches with a spoon of food and tells him to open his mouth. You have an evil smile on your face. It's been 10 years since then. Two people in a lab coat are approaching the door. The one wearing glasses tells the other scientist with dark hair that that's his cell. The door's open. The scientist is paralyzed in shock. Amamiya Hiroto has changed. You are now so thin that only bones are visible. Your hair turned gray. The glasses scientist presents him as the first death wizard who ever existed in this world. After these words, he leaves, saying that he will leave the rest with him. The new scientist answers that he understood it. He turns to Amamiya. He looks at Amamiya Hiroto and thinks that's it. He can finally unravel the secret of this kind of magic he's never seen before. With this conquest, you may be able to overcome your predecessors. Amamiya Hiroto opens her eyes. He sees before him not only the new scientist, but also the spirits of some girls. A blonde woman calls him by his name. Amamiya Hiroto recognizes her and says they came here again. They ask how he's doing. He says he's fine. Considering that all are spirits, there is no need to answer that question. The lowest girl turns to the scientist and says it looks like the young man there is new. They express hope that his methods will be better. Amamiya Hiroto tells them, without knowing how to say it, that he thinks they don't understand how rotten these people are. They conducted numerous experiments on his body. Repeatedly, it's not just painful, it's unbearable. The girl apologizes to him and says they can't help him because now they're mostly souls, but maybe they'll figure out a way to escape. Amamiya Hiroto tells them not to worry about it, since being able to communicate with someone in this place is enough for him. Without them, he wouldn't have anyone to talk to in the last 10 years. Your mind could go crazy because of this loneliness. The blonde says she's happy to be useful to him anyway, but Amamiya also helped them calm down. The girl next to her smiles and says it's true, for some reason, they still couldn't turn. And that day, they all ended up there. Amamiya Hiroto says it might be because of her death magic. Ever since you learned to use it, you've been seeing spirits. Maybe that's what brought them there. A dog spirit is caressing him? The girl says there are still many souls here besides them. Everyone loves him and wants him out of here, but in their current state, it seems they can't do anything useful. They say they're sorry. Amemiya Hiroto is not responding. The girls are worried. They ask, "What happened? Is he really in pain?" He says it doesn't hurt. He just remembered something from his old memories. Narus, Narumi, and the others. He wonders what they're doing now. If they were people who received power from this god, they might as well get him out of here, but no one came. Here, suddenly, the new scientist slaps the table, cursing everything around him. It's been a whole month, but he can't get a clear result. If everything goes on like this, he'll end up being expelled, and he'll be removed from that position. The scientist turns to Amemiya Hiroto and punches him in the face, calling him useless. Amemiya Hiroto loses her balance and simply falls flat. The mad scientist keeps screaming and pulling his hair. The spirit of that blonde asks Amemiya Hiroto if he's okay. Amemiya Hiroto replies that he was hit so hard that his face hurts like he's in hell now. The little girl gets angry and yells at the scientist. How dare he do this to Amemiya Hiroto? How dare he do this to Amemiya Hiroto? The scientist, in his madness, keeps thinking. Maybe if he does, he'll be able to free up his limits and magic will reach all his power. Every action of the scientist makes Amemiya Hiroto suffer. He tries to scream, but he can't. Just sigh often. The spirit of a dog barks at the scientist. A little girl spirit, panicking, asks the scientist what he's doing. Stop immediately. She wants to attack the scientist, but she realizes she's simply crossing his body, which continues with her experiments. The spirit lowers its head and asks for forgiveness from Amemiya Hiroto, for there is nothing they can do to stop this lunatic. The scientist looks away from the monitor, surprised, and marvels at the amount of magic that the death wizard, Amemiya Hiroto, possesses. He screams that he's still growing. It's amazing. He's 10,000 times more powerful than the strongest wizard in the world today. He says, this guy is a real monster, and starts laughing. Amemiya Hiroto feels the last sensation and falls lifeless on the ground, her eyes sliding upwards. The scientist turns to look at him. "Get out of the chair and get close," he asks, horrified. If it's a joke, if he's really dead. You panic and ask him to stop playing. Who let him die? He thinks about your research. What will happen to your research now? He sees there's still magic emanating from his fingers. The scientist grabs his head, but his attention is drawn to a computer signal. He doesn't understand what kind of reaction that is. His body had already ceased all functions. But magical power was still growing. Had never seen anything like it before. You finally found it. With that, your research could... At this moment, Amemiya Hiroto's eyes suddenly open, and he has no time to react before his hands reach the scientist's neck. Your hands shake your neck tight. Foam runs from the scientist's mouth. He begs with his last strength to stop. Black eyes stare at him with hatred. And the scientist breathes his last breath. Amemiya Hiroto leaves him on the ground. His body falls without life. The blonde spirit calls his name. Suddenly, Amemiya Hiroto starts laughing. He looks at his palms and says he finally managed to recover. He's talking about his whole body. He destroys the scientist's body with his fist. And goes to the other two scientists. Don't they understand what that means? They didn't cut all ties with his body. They panic and say this can't be happening, and this situation needs to end. This shouldn't have happened. Amemiya Hiroto looks at them and remembers all the experiments and cruelties that were made by them. He only repeats the word kill in his mind. You look at them and you say you're gonna kill them all. The scientist points out a gun and yells at him not to approach. He shoots bullets, but Amemiya Hiroto does nothing. The glasses scientist says he can't be killed. It's impossible because your body is already dead. Maybe that's why, when his body stopped working, the soul was finally released from its prison and managed to gain full control over an immense magical power. He turned into an undead man and took control of his body. The scientist starts laughing all of a sudden and shouts that this is incredible because with it, his power surpasses even their imagination. With one stroke, Amemiya Hiroto beheaded him. He falls without life, with a smile still on his face. Amemiya Hiroto sighs, look at the corpse, and then smile with pleasure. A crowd of mastodons screams at him, asking him not to. Amemiya Hiroto raises her hand and throws all the metal instruments at doctors, making them scream and groan. He gets shot by the guards, but he doesn't die. Power overflows in your body. He now understands what it's like to use magic at will. That's what he feels when he releases his power to the fullest. He approaches some doors and assumes there are survivors there. Using his power, he opens the doors. He sees what he sees, and your eyes roll out. He sees countless people, unconscious in beds and immersed in liquid. He sees that they were trying to create another death wizard besides him. He sees a girl with her eyes open. He turns to her and asks. She can't move either. Is right? The girl doesn't answer. He uses his magic and tells her that if they want to escape, they must follow him. He goes out with people and says that maybe there are still enemies left. He goes ahead, and they should follow him, but not forget to keep their distance. He runs, and finally comes out, where countless soldiers with weapons and uniforms are standing. Everyone looks like your acquaintances from the shipwreck. He starts crying and thinking that everyone is there, that they came to save him, even if it took too long, to be honest. But he always believed that they would eventually meet again. His dream came true. He calls them warm, but someone screams for others to prepare. And then everyone uses their magic and attacks him. He doesn't understand why they're attacking him. Hez, their classmate, is one of them. They don't remember. Amemiya Hiroto falls to the ground, shocked by their magic. One of them says it all happened unexpectedly fast. They were told that an incredibly powerful undead had appeared there, and they killed him without even using all his power. One comments that it's reasonable, since it's 30 heroes out of 100. Nothing can stop a team like that. He turns to Murakami and asks if it's right to call him sensei. He says he told him to stop calling him sensei. One of them claims they're all there, but nothing can stop them. He comments that the reason they managed to defeat him without difficulty is because the undead creature had let down the guard. Amemiya Hiroto hears all this. The girl he saved once said that he personally destroyed the entire lab team. The magic of death. She calls it a disgusting force. Someone suggests that maybe he wants it to end like this after all. Here's one of the experiments in this lab. The girl turns to the boy, calls him Amemiya Hiroto, and says maybe he's right. Amemiya Hiroto realizes that he is the one who has taken all his power. The girl says that at least from now on, he won't feel any more pain. He offers to destroy Amemiya Hiroto completely. Amemiya tells her she understands, and claims it's the least they can do for him. He turns to Narumi and offers to do so. She agrees. Both extend their hand to Amemiya Hiroto, the Wizard of Death. Amemiya Hiroto thinks furiously. Is he really kidding? Why does the weight fall only on him? Besides, why is he here? He took everything that should have been his. And now he's there with his heroic face. He sees others having fun in a calm atmosphere and decides that he will kill them all, even if he can reincarnate. He will never forgive you, Amemiya Hiroto. Amemiya Hiroto disappears, and Rodkorte appears before him, saying that, as I expected, he did not last long. He calls Amemiya Hiroto by name, and turns to face him, in the midst of madness and anger. Amemiya Hiroto throws herself against him with his fists, but cannot hit him, and crosses Rodkat. He closes his fists, and asks why he was sent away. Now he can still call himself God, because your second life is a complete hell. He screams that it was his fault, that he threw him into an even worse nightmare than his previous life. Rodkorte says it's true that he treated him so terribly, but at least he can live happily in the next life. Amemiya Hiroto doesn't understand what next life is talking about. He asks if you really mean there's a third chance. Rodkorte answers that this is correct, and that this world is called Lambda. Amemiya Hiroto asks if it is true that he will be the first to reincarnate there. He screams that then he will have the full benefit of it, that he can finally kill them all. He reaches out to God and tells him in an authoritarian tone to grant him some of his special abilities, since there is no one else here to make a mistake. Rodkorte tells him that, unfortunately, he cannot grant you any power. Hold out your hand, and Amemiya Hiroto begins to disappear again. He screams outraged, asking what he means. Why is he the only one who gets nothing? Why him again? God answers that it is because he cannot allow him to kill his classmate, and he looks surprised at him. Rodkorte explains that, compared to the other world for which he is responsible, Lambda is behind in terms of development. The reason you're giving him this chance is so he can build his world with his own hands. He gives you the advice to view your second life in origin as an experience. Perhaps he can see it as a training period. Amemiya Hiroto faces him with hatred and says it was a real hell and that he dares call it training. Rodkorte says he would like to express his deepest gratitude for his contribution to the development of a new element of magic that boosted Origin's growth. He hopes he can be forgiven for not giving him due recognition for his unfortunate second life. Amemiya Hiroto screams at him to stop playing and says he will never forgive him. Then a dark power explodes from his mouth. Rodcute reaches out his hand and says that this is the curse he will give him, that cannot be broken. He really hopes that Hiroto can give up this vengeful thought and choose a better way to end his next life. He assures that Amemiya Hiroto can trust his word. He will ease the pain he experienced when he reaches his fourth life, and then he can return to the normal cycle of reincarnation. Before his eyes, he hears a certain female voice. He sees a blonde with elf ears in front of him. She looks at him lovingly and says, "Vandalia is always so calm. She thinks it's less problematic for her, but he needs to cry once in a while." Amemiya Hiroto was reborn and Lambda was cursed, and now he was born as a small child with the same elfic ears. Baby Amemiya Hiroto hits her belly and tries to say something, but only baby sounds come out of her mouth. The woman picks him up, calls him Wendell, and says it's time to get up, suggesting he's hungry. She pulls him around and says it's time to eat. Amemiya Hiroto touches the woman reluctantly and looks away. A woman tries some food and says it's delicious. Here is an explanation about what this place, God called it Lambda. Amemiya Hiroto is thinking, just look at him. He is completely helpless because he cannot even speak. It emits sounds. The elf asks what it was. Amemiya Hiroto assures her that the elf is her mother. He hears the name Wendell and assumes that this is how he will be called in this world. Compared to his past life, where he had an experiment code instead of a name, this new one doesn't look so bad. He extends his clear palm toward his mother's dark face and looks at her with an expression of doubt. She asks him if he feels ashamed that they have different skin colors. She says Wendell is very smart, since she can tell these things at her age. She explains that his skin color comes from his own father, and tells him not to worry, because he's still Darcia's son, Amemiya Hiroto understands. Returning to the memory fragments in his mind, preserved from the time before Lambda, in this world, there is a race very similar to humans. They're called elves. The mother pats Amemiya Hiroto on the back, calming him down upon returning to this woman who introduced herself as Darcia. There's a chance she's a black elf. What race could your father be? She keeps patting his back. He wonders if she could stop talking so low, but it's actually quite effective. He wakes up and is told that it's incredible. Because you can sit alone, Darcia caresses your head. Amemiya Hiroto understands he's been praised. It seems your mother has realized that he is much smarter than ordinary children. But she does not despise a strange child like him. And then the mother says a sentence, as expected from her father's son. Amemiya Hiroto realizes she's never seen her father, and she's interested in him, however. He did not have a father in his past or in his previous life, and being encouraged by another person was a feeling he had never experienced before. Darcia keeps praising him, saying he's wonderful and caressing his head. After all, his mother praised him, making him even happier. But he wants to be praised even more. He thinks maybe you should start crawling. Suddenly, he stands up on his hands and feet, starts crawling, and mentally tells his mother to look at him. Darcia gets surprised and asks if he's trying to crawl. Suddenly, Amemiya Hiroto falls on her forehead. Darcia says, in her opinion, it's too early for that. She says she's interested in his status now. He doesn't understand what she's talking about. This is real life, by the way, not some kind of game, suddenly. He really sees the status and is surprised to have just appeared right in front of his face. Is that really a status screen? He does not believe that there are really such signs in this world. What kind of world is this? He sighs and ponders, just watching. He sees that his race is a Dhampir. He's supposed to be half a vampire. He wonders if that means his father is a vampire. He imagines his father with fangs and a dark cape. Thinking about it, you realize the house seemed a little strange at first sight. It was a cave. Several months have passed since his birth. But no one has come here. He believes that being a child with vampire blood in his veins is why he became a target. In other words, your mother hid you here to protect you from the outside world. Evaluating the situation, he would say that most likely his father is no longer alive. He then looks at his characteristics. You see that your magic points are equal to 1 billion. A number so long, it goes beyond the screen line. He remembers Rockworth's words that his soul will be different as a sign of compensation. Unlike the souls of his classmates, his will be like an empty nucleus, and in this core, instead of abilities, an incredible amount of magic will be accumulated. He understands that this is what the old man was talking about. It's true, because these numbers are amazing for an ordinary child. But Rockworth said there would be no magic, which means he decides to immediately check whether his guess is right or not. He extends his little palms and realizes he can't use his death magic. He wonders if it's because he's still small, or because he's in Lambda, and he needs to find a different kind of magic. He sees his curse, which says it's impossible to restore experience points from past lives. That's why he can't use magic anymore, even if he understands what she is. He realizes he shouldn't have more than one. You wonder if Rodcourt wants him to take his own life or something. But there are still other ways to study magic. He won't wait for death like Rodcourt wants he. Suddenly your stomach starts to snore. Darcia asks if he's hungry again. She thinks it's time to eat again. He wonders if it's starting again. He imagines that if he was the teenager, the curse would no longer matter to him, that sigh would make him nervous, but he still has the body of a child, so he won't react when he sees a woman's body. Darcia reaches out and grabs him in her lap. Amemiya Hiroto thinks that no matter what they think of him, but saying that to a guy like him, who looks like a child and eats without strange thoughts, is a real test. Amemiya Hiroto looks away. Darcia says he's quite capricious. She asks if he really hates her milk so much. He shakes his head in panic and says, "No way, it's delicious." He sighs and starts eating. It seems you have no choice but to make concessions. She looks in his mouth and sees that her prey is beginning to grow. Although I think it's wrong, she asks him to wait and says he shot a rabbit while hunting yesterday, then starts looking for it. She takes off the rabbit and cuts it right in front of his eyes, deliberately, collects the animal's blood. She delivers a plate of blood to Amemiya Hiroto and tells him to drink. He wonders, surprised if she's serious. She feels that blood smells like iron, forcing children to drink animal blood. That's how children are raised in this world. Darcia sees that he turns his face and starts looking at him with sadness. He quietly asks her not to look at him with those eyes, so he decides to drink. He drinks and, to his surprise, realizes it's delicious, even with the inevitable unpleasant smell. He still drinks it with pleasure. He wipes the blood from his mouth and realizes that he had not drunk anything but breast milk. Then everything's fine. She caresses his head and says that since Wendell is just like his father, he can eat blood. She explains that it is not necessary to drink every day. So she asks him to promise that he will drink only when she is around, even if he is hungry. Amemiya Hiroto realizes that he is in fact a half-vampire, and his mother realizes that vampires are not welcome in human society, and therefore cares about him. Instead of living with a problem like him, our guy realizes his mom can get rid of that burden. He understands that she doesn't do that and apparently never thought about it once. At least that's what he thinks. The mother beats her hands in different directions, trying to kill the insect. He sighs and says he can't concentrate while those mosquitoes are flying around. At this moment, Amemiya Hiroto reaches out her small hand and kills the mosquito. His mother looks at him surprised and sees the mosquito fall. Amemiya Hiroto says a few syllables. Now he has access to a new skill called the elimination of microorganisms. Darcia suddenly approaches him and asks if he did it. She finds it impressive that he can use magic at such a young age. She calls him a prodigy. It seems he can still use death magic even in this world, despite being a familiar spell. It looks completely new after what he learned in his previous life. Receiving compliments from your mother is an achievement that makes you extremely proud of yourself. But being happy isn't enough to get even. He needs more power, because these guys are just having fun. They are all people who receive power from God. At night, Amemiya Hiroto sleeps with her mother. Rodcourt sent him especially to Lambda, to make this world even more developed. He thinks it's fair not to let him do what he wants after he said he wanted to kill the rest of the reincarnated. Even when he finds a way to eliminate the curse and survive on his own, he will drag everyone else here again and kill him. Then the fight will be useless. Mom suddenly wakes up and looks at him. She starts poking her cheek, pulling and reaching out to tickle him. She tickles and asks if he likes it. She offers to check how long he'll laugh. He doesn't understand what his mother is doing or what she's thinking. Your mother says Wendell never shows emotion because he doesn't cry or laugh. But if you stop to think, from the moment he arrived on Earth, he never showed his feelings on his face. He wonders if that's part of the curse. How could anyone invent such a boring curse? So Darcia tells him that she really loves him, but apparently he hasn't felt it yet. Those words surprise Amemiya Hiroto. The next day, Darcia holds Amemiya Hiroto in her hand and opens the door with the other. She says she's sorry if it hurts. She holds the palm of his hand and tries to expose it to sunlight. Nothing happens. Darcia is happy and says it's a relief. She's very happy he doesn't have a vampire weakness. At this moment, Amemiya Hiroto finally understands that his father is a vampire, which means he is not affected by the sun because he has more than just vampire blood. He realizes that anyway. He is still a target for everyone and everything in this world. He looks at his mother. He reflects that if that's the case, then when bad things start to happen, he's not sure anyone will be on her side. She opens the door completely and asks why they don't go out for some fresh air. As soon as they leave, Amemiya Hiroto, who was sitting deep inside the baby's body. You look up and you're surprised. They go out into the garden, full of vegetation. A gentle breeze blows, butterflies fly everywhere, and the baby is still there. Amemiya Hiroto is still there. The sunbeams touch his body, the birds sing. Darcia says the weather is really nice today. Amemiya Hiroto's eyes fill with tears, and then he starts crying. Darcia is surprised by his crying. So you hug him, and you say everything's okay, and everything's gonna be okay. She caresses him and says that one day he will be able to return to the settlement of the Black Elves, her homeland. And then he will finally be free, and do whatever he wants. Little Amemiya Hiroto keeps saying he can return to the settlement of the Black Elves, who loves his mother, had never dreamed of saying those words to a woman before, like now. He realizes the curse keeps him from showing emotion. It's even more painful than he expected. At night, he thinks again that if she stays with him, she'll end up bringing trouble to herself. The day he can talk, he decides to tell her everything, even if that means she has to stay away from him. He still has no choice. But if you can keep living like this, having a happy life with your mother, he doesn't need a fourth life. He continues to remember the words of Rockdorth, who hoped he would forget this vengeful thought and choose a better way to end his next life. He gave him his word that he would spare him the pain that would await him when he was reborn for the fourth time, and would erase all his memory. After which, he would return to the normal cycle of reincarnation. Amemiya Hiroto tells himself he refuses to die. He doesn't need a fourth life. He just wants to live with his mother for the rest of his life. The next day, the sun shines brightly. Darcia gives you a kiss on the forehead and says you need to go away for a while. She asks him to be a good boy and wait for her there. She goes out the door. Amemiya crawls to the door and watches her go away. Sometimes she would secretly go to the nearby villages, like today, to prepare for the long journey ahead. She bought everything she needed to live, right now. He casts spells and believes he needs to train his magic skills. With access to the ability to eliminate microorganisms, there's a rabbit in a saucer, and it says he's very hungry, he thinks. With that skill, he might drink blood without causing harm. But on that day, as long as you waited, your mother never came back.